So it's an unbelievable good preservation of this enclosure, which had been erected by Stone Age people so long ago.
Before his death, Klaus Schmidt, discoverer of Göbekli Tepe, spoke of a secret he had long kept hidden. A quiet mound called Gurcutepe, where he believed the true origin of civilization still lies buried. Why did he guard it so fiercely? And what shocking truth could be so powerful that he dared not reveal it till the very end?
It's a surprising fact here in Göbekli Tepe that we have monumental architecture so early in the history of mankind.
The discovery of Göbekli Tepe in southeastern Turkey changed everything we thought we knew about the human past. When archaeologists uncovered its massive T-shaped stone pillars carved more than 11,000 years ago, the entire framework of prehistory was forced into question. Until then, it was widely believed that organized religion, monumental architecture, and complex social systems only appeared after farming had taken root. Yet here was a ceremonial center built by hunter-gatherers thousands of years before agriculture became established, and its very existence forced scholars to rethink the origins of civilization. At the center of this discovery was Klaus Schmidt, a German archaeologist whose dedication and vision transformed Göbekli Tepe from an overlooked mound into one of the most important archaeological revelations of the 20th century. Schmidt arrived in the region in the mid-1990s, and where earlier surveys had recorded scattered stone fragments, he saw the signs of a prehistoric sanctuary. For nearly 2 decades, until his death in 2014, he devoted himself to carefully excavating, studying, and interpreting the site. While his work brought Göbekli Tepe to global attention and raised profound questions about history, most people do not realize that Schmidt also investigated another deeply intriguing site in the same region. In the mid to late 1990s, while Göbekli Tepe was beginning to emerge into the spotlight, Schmidt and his team carried out surveys at a place called Gurcutepe, located only a short distance from the city of Şanlıurfa. Today, it lies beneath fields and modern settlements, barely visible on the surface. But beneath this landscape are traces of prehistoric activity that may hold crucial clues to a chapter of history still largely hidden. What makes Gurcutepe so intriguing is the possibility that it represents the period after Göbekli Tepe's great ceremonial enclosures were abandoned. Archaeologists have long wondered what happened when the era of the massive stone pillars came to an end. Did the people move elsewhere? Did their traditions change? Well, it turns out that Gurcutepe could be the missing link that shows the gradual transition from the world of monumental sanctuaries to the beginnings of settled communities that would shape the future of human society. And what Klaus Schmidt discovered in this site is so shocking, it could completely rewrite everything we thought we knew about Neolithic archaeology. The city hiding under modern life. When most people hear about archaeology in southeastern Turkey, they picture Göbekli Tepe, a dramatic hilltop crowned with massive carved pillars. But only a short distance away, another site hides in plain sight. This place is Gurcutepe, a name that holds some of the most important answers about what happened after the age of Göbekli Tepe came to an end. Gurcutepe lies on the Harran Plain, roughly 3 to 4 kilometers southeast of the bustling city of Şanlıurfa. At first glance, nothing about the terrain suggests a deep past. It looks like ordinary farmland, stretches of flat earth, intersected by roads, bordered by low houses and fields worked by local families. Unlike Göbekli Tepe, which rises on a hill and commands a clear view of the surrounding landscape, Gurcutepe blends into the everyday world of the present. A visitor driving past would likely see only modern life, fields, construction, and scattered neighborhoods, without realizing that beneath the soil lie the remains of prehistoric communities. Archaeologists describe the site as a group of low mounds. In its earliest surveys, 4 main mounds were identified, but later assessments suggested that the ancient remains may extend across as many as 8 separate settlement areas, often referred to as Gurcutepe 1 through 8. These are not tall, dramatic hills, but rather shallow rises in the land, easily overlooked and in many places already disturbed by farming and modern building projects. This is one of the reasons why the site never drew the same immediate attention as Göbekli Tepe. Its profile was modest, its outlines difficult to recognize, and much of its archaeological record had already been disrupted by development. This damage posed a major challenge. Over the decades, construction and agriculture cut into the mounds, leveling parts of them, and in some cases removing large portions of the archaeological layers, and leaving only fragments of what had once been continuous settlements scattered in patches beneath modern fields and homes. Archaeologists had to piece together a story from incomplete remains, knowing that large parts of the evidence might already have been lost forever. Yet even in this incomplete state, Gurcutepe is still more significant than it looks. What seems like ordinary ground concealed a stratigraphy that reached as deep as 6 meters in places, representing thousands of years of continuous human activity. These layers extended back to the late pre-pottery Neolithic period, the same cultural horizon that produced Göbekli Tepe, and then carried forward into later Neolithic phases. While Göbekli Tepe was primarily a ceremonial center, Gurcutepe showed the traces of daily life. In the soil, archaeologists uncovered hearths where fires once burned, stone walls that marked the outlines of houses, and workshops where tools were made. The contrast was striking, where Göbekli Tepe revealed the monumental architecture of rituals and gatherings. Gurcutepe provided evidence of settlements, families, and the routines of living. It was in the mid to late 1990s that Klaus Schmidt and his team began opening test trenches at Gurcutepe. At this time, Göbekli Tepe was still only beginning to emerge as an extraordinary site. Not yet the global symbol of early civilization it would become. But to Schmidt, however, Gurcutepe was never a secondary curiosity. He saw in it the potential to fill in the critical gap between the monumental sanctuaries and the rise of domestic life in villages. He reportedly referred to it privately as the other site, a phrase that captured his sense of its importance as a counterpart to Göbekli Tepe. The test trenches revealed clear differences in purpose. Göbekli Tepe's enclosures, with their towering pillars and intricate carvings, had no evidence of permanent habitation. There were no hearths for daily cooking, no storage spaces, and no traces of ordinary domestic architecture. It was a place designed for gatherings, ceremonies, and perhaps religious or communal functions on a scale far beyond the needs of any single household. Gurcutepe, on the other hand, showed signs of settlement from the beginning. Hearths, walls, and small-scale structures appeared in its earliest layers, pointing to people living and working there. The presence of workshops suggested craft activity, and the traces of domestic life were unmistakable. The contrast between the two sites helped frame one of the central questions of Neolithic archaeology. How did human groups move from building extraordinary ceremonial centers like Göbekli Tepe to forming the first villages? Until sites like Gurcutepe were studied, there was a sense of discontinuity. Göbekli Tepe seemed almost to appear out of nowhere and then disappear, with little explanation of what came after. Gurcutepe, however, showed that life did not vanish with the end of the great enclosures. Instead, people adapted, settled, and developed new ways of living in smaller but permanent communities. This made Gurcutepe unique in Schmidt's eyes. It was not as visually dramatic as Göbekli Tepe, and it did not attract headlines in the same way, but its value lay in the quieter details of daily existence. The hearths revealed how people cooked and gathered. The walls mapped out the first steps toward planned domestic space. And the stratigraphy recorded centuries of change, showing how traditions shifted gradually over time. In a sense, Gurcutepe represented the bridge between the world of temples and the world of homes. What complicates things even further is the fact that much of Gurcutepe remains hidden and unexcavated. Only limited test trenches were opened in the 1990s, and large parts of the site are inaccessible beneath modern buildings and farmland. This means that many of its secrets remain underground, waiting for future study. Even so, the fragments that have been recovered are enough to reshape our understanding of the region. The image that emerges is of a landscape where monumental sanctuaries and domestic settlements coexisted, sometimes only a few kilometers apart, each serving a different role in the lives of the people who built them. But the significance of Gurcutepe went beyond its walls and hearths. Schmidt believed it might hold the key to explaining the transition that puzzled so many archaeologists: how societies moved from constructing vast ceremonial centers to organizing themselves around the rhythms of daily life. In his view, the site was a living record of that transformation. If Göbekli Tepe marked the height of ritual gathering, Gurcutepe recorded what came after, when people turned their attention to building homes, workshops, and communities. This perspective changes the way we think about the dawn of settled life. Instead of seeing a sudden break between a world of rituals and a world of villages, sites like Gurcutepe are proof of a gradual transition, where elements of both worlds overlapped and influenced one another. The monumental enclosures were not abandoned in isolation. They were part of a larger landscape where settlements emerged, flourished, and evolved. But how exactly did this transformation unfold? And what do the remains of Gurcutepe reveal about the shift from temples to domestic life? Gobekli versus Gurcutepe. When you walk through the ruins of Göbekli Tepe, you're stepping into a world of symbols carved in stone. Towering T-shaped pillars rise from circular enclosures, each decorated with animals, including foxes, snakes, vultures, wild boars, and many others. These figures are not random decorations. They belong to a symbolic language that brought people together. For centuries, hunter-gatherer groups traveled across the landscape to gather at this hilltop sanctuary. Here, they shared rituals, built monuments, and carved their identity into stone, a world defined by gathering, by ceremony, and by symbols too large to ignore. But only a few kilometers away, at Gurcutepe, the picture is very different. Instead of massive stone circles, archaeologists found the outlines of rectangular houses. Instead of tall pillars, they uncovered hearths where families cooked their meals. In place of carved animals dominating public space, they found stone tools, axes, mortars, and pestles, the everyday equipment of survival. The finds from Gurcutepe are striking in their detail. Hearths appear again and again in the stratigraphy, showing how central fire was to domestic life. Stone walls define rectangular spaces, marking a shift toward permanent architecture. Flint tools were found in large numbers, showing workshops where blades and scrapers were produced. Stone axes appear, heavy implements designed for clearing wood or working hard materials. Mortars and pestles point directly to food preparation, pounding, grinding, and processing plants. All of this evidence points to a community organized around daily needs, a world in which survival and stability were tied to the rhythms of domestic life. Perhaps the most fascinating finds are the figurines. Archaeologists at Gurcutepe uncovered a wide variety of small human representations. Some are male, some are female, and some are difficult to assign to a specific gender. The corpulent female forms stand out in particular, with broad hips and full bodies, carved with a focus on fertility and abundance. These figurines are not towering symbols like the pillars of Göbekli Tepe, but their meaning is powerful in a different way. They speak to households, to families, and to communities that saw fertility and reproduction as central to their survival. This contrast is deeply powerful. At Göbekli Tepe, symbols were public, carved into massive stones that dominated the landscape. At Gurcutepe, symbols entered the home. Figurines sat inside houses, ornaments were worn on the body, and symbolic meaning became a part of daily domestic life. What had once been displayed on a monumental scale was now expressed through smaller objects tied to individuals and households. In this sense, Gurcutepe reveals not only a change in architecture, but also a cultural shift in how meaning was expressed. Rituals did not disappear, but they became more personal, woven into the fabric of everyday living. This is why many archaeologists see Gurcutepe as a bridge between two worlds. Göbekli Tepe represents the high point of ceremonial construction, a gathering place that united groups through massive shared projects. Gurcutepe shows what happened afterward, when communities turned inward, building homes, making tools, raising families, and embedding symbolic meaning within their domestic life. It's a shift from monumentality to intimacy, from a shared stage of rituals to the private sphere of the household. For years, these ideas rested largely on the pioneering work of Klaus Schmidt. He believed Gurcutepe could explain the transition, but his evidence was limited to the test trenches of the 1990s. Then, decades later, his suspicions were tested again. In 2021 and 2022, archaeologists returned to Gurcutepe as part of the large-scale Taş Tepeler project, which set out to investigate the broader landscape of early Neolithic sites around Şanlıurfa. For the first time since Schmidt's early surveys, Gurcutepe was reopened with modern archaeological methods. The team focused on Gurcutepe 3, one of the identified settlement mounds, and what they found brought Schmidt's vision into sharper focus. The new excavations revealed preserved stratigraphy that confirmed the depth and continuity of the site. Layer upon layer of occupation showed how people had lived there across centuries. Within these layers, archaeologists uncovered domestic structures, including hearths, walls, and the remains of houses that once stood side by side. They found workshops filled with flakes of flint, showing where stone tools had been shaped. They discovered figurines once again, along with ornaments and objects used in daily and symbolic practices. Food processing equipment appeared in large numbers, reinforcing the picture of a community deeply engaged in preparing and sharing meals. The dating of these layers was particularly important. Analysis showed that Gurcutepe belonged mainly to the late pre-pottery Neolithic B and extended into the pre-pottery Neolithic C. This made the site generally later than Göbekli Tepe, which belonged primarily to the early pre-pottery Neolithic. In other words, Gurcutepe represented the continuation of the story, the period after the great enclosures were no longer built. This confirmed Schmidt's long-held suspicion. Gurcutepe was not simply another site in the region, it was the after-story, the missing chapter that showed what came next. This is the cultural shift that Gurcutepe captures so clearly. Symbols once carved into towering stones reappeared in figurines and ornaments small enough to hold in the hand. Rituals once enacted in vast enclosures moved into the household, tied to food, fertility, and family. Architecture once devoted to the communal became focused on the domestic. This was not an ending, but a transformation, a rebalancing of human priorities from monumental expression to daily survival and identity. Klaus Schmidt believed that Göbekli Tepe and Gurcutepe were two sides of the same story, and the renewed excavations of the 21st century are proving him right. Göbekli Tepe shows us the world of rituals that drew people together. Gurcutepe shows us how those same people began to live in permanent settlements, shaping their daily lives with symbols, tools, and traditions carried into the home. And so, from the hilltop of Göbekli Tepe to the buried mounds of Gurcutepe, it's possible to trace the arc of one of the greatest transformations in human history. The age of monuments gave way to the age of homes, and in that shift, the foundations of civilization were laid. But what did daily life actually look like inside these first houses? What did people cook? What tools did they use? And what role did their symbolic figurines play in the rhythms of ordinary days? The answer to this question lies inside the world of Neolithic daily life. Daily life in the Neolithic. When archaeologists look closely at Gurcutepe, what emerges is not only the outline of houses and hearths, but also the rhythm of daily life more than 9,000 years ago. The site paints a picture of a balanced economy, one that combined farming, herding, and hunting. Grinding stones, mortars, and pestles reveal that people were already processing grains and plants. Heavy stone axes point to woodworking, clearing trees, and shaping timber for building. At the same time, flint points and animal bones show that hunting continued to play an important role, with wild deer, gazelle, and boar still part of the community's diet. It was not a simple switch from hunting to farming, but a careful blend of both ways of life, ensuring stability through diversity. Inside these homes, symbolism was never far away. Small figurines appeared in domestic spaces, along with beads and ornaments that were worn or kept close at hand. Unlike the towering pillars of Göbekli Tepe, which spoke to gatherings on a monumental scale, these objects were part of everyday existence. They show that spirituality had moved into the household, woven directly into the routines of cooking, crafting, and raising families. Each figurine, bead, or carved ornament carried meaning, and that meaning was present in the intimate spaces of daily living. The relationship with animals also reveals this balance between survival and symbolism. Archaeologists found remains of sheep, goats, pigs, and cattle alongside wild game. Some of these species were in the early stages of domestication, showing how people were beginning to shape their environment through herding and selective breeding. Yet the hunt still mattered, and wild species remained part of the food economy. This coexistence of the wild and the domestic reflects a society in transition, with one foot in the old world of foraging and the other stepping toward the new world of agriculture. But these daily routines are not only about survival. They mark the beginning of a new timeline for early society, one in which homes, families, and communities became the true stage of history. A new timeline for early society. When archaeologists place Göbekli Tepe and Gurcutepe side by side, a new timeline of early society begins to take shape. Göbekli Tepe belongs to what scholars call the pre-pottery Neolithic A and the early pre-pottery Neolithic B. This was a period more than 11,000 years ago when people had not yet adopted pottery or fully domesticated crops and animals, yet were already gathering to build enormous ritual enclosures. It represents an age when communal identity was expressed through ceremony. How many more sites lie buried beneath today's towns, villages, and fields? Archaeologists believe the region is dotted with mounds, some identified, many not yet studied, each potentially holding pieces of the transition from ritual to settlement. The surface may look ordinary, but beneath it lies evidence that could reshape the earliest chapters of human history. And this is where it gets disturbing, because this hidden history is fragile. Urban growth around Şanlıurfa expands every year. Fields are plowed, houses are built, and roads cut through the land. Each of these changes threatens the mounds that remain, At Gurcutepe itself, much of the site has already been damaged or lost, leaving only fragments of stratigraphy to study. For archaeologists, this creates a race against time. Every season that passes without excavation risks losing more evidence to modern development. What can be preserved must be preserved quickly, and what can be documented must be documented before it disappears. This urgency has become a central concern of the Taş Tepeler project, which includes not only Göbekli Tepe and Gurcutepe, but also a network of other early Neolithic sites across the Şanlıurfa region. By surveying, excavating, and protecting these locations, archaeologists hope to secure a fuller record of the world Schmidt first glimpsed in the 1990s. The work is painstaking, but the stakes are high. Each figurine, each hearth, and each layer of soil holds a piece of the puzzle, and together they may reveal how the builders of sanctuaries became the builders of homes. After his death, the responsibility of carrying this vision forward fell to his wife, Çiğdem Köksal Schmidt, and his colleagues, who continue to excavate, preserve, and study the sites he first revealed. Still, a sense of mystery lingers. Schmidt left behind questions without final answers, and the possibility that the most important truths of Gürcütepe remain waiting for future generations to uncover. This was always the point. For Schmidt, he often said that archaeology is not about finding spectacular monuments alone, but about understanding the lives of the people who created them. Göbekli Tepe dazzled the world, but Gurcutepe grounded it in the reality of daily life. Together, they show that humanity's earliest organized societies were not only capable of grand ritual, but also of resilience, adaptation, and continuity. The implication is clear. Civilization did not begin in a single moment, nor in a single place, nor with a single invention like farming or writing. It began with communities learning to adapt, to reorganize themselves, and to carry meaning forward into new forms. That process started long before the first cities, and its traces are still buried beneath the soil of Anatolia. The story of Göbekli Tepe and Gurcutepe is not only about the distant past, it is about humanity and the cycles of rise and transformation that shape all societies. It is about the possibility that many chapters of human history remain hidden, waiting to be uncovered before they are lost forever. And it is about the responsibility to preserve what remains, because once these fragile traces are gone, the voices of the people who built the first sanctuaries and the first homes will be silent forever. Klaus Schmidt may be gone, but the soil of Gurcutepe still guards the story he could not finish. The question is no longer what we've found, but what still lies waiting. But what do you think? Is there more to the Gurcutepe than meets the eye? Drop your answers in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to click on the next video on your screen, like this video, and subscribe to our channel for more updates.